Welcome everyone to the Cult of Crasus. Today's segment will be State of the Game, Flashpoints. Now the purpose of Flashpoints, many think, it is a separate part of the game to get you prepared for in-game ops. So basically, just like dungeons in World of Warcraft, what Flashpoints do is they break it down to half, where you'll need a tank, 2 DPS, and a healer in order to complete your objectives. And it's basically like raiding light. However, as you're leveling up, the Flashpoints actually introduce you to story arcs, various story arcs that occur either as you're leveling and continue through the instance, or just another kind of subplot to get you interested in some various stories that we have. It does push storyline completely. That is the one thing that Star Wars does well. Star Wars tries its best to engage you, to make you part of the story. So therefore, you don't really see a lot of NPC storytelling per se. It's you with your group, and you go and accomplish this. There is no one swooping in at the end in order to take credit or anything like that. It's basically stuff that you do, which, you know, is quite fulfilling as you're leveling up and as you're playing the game. To give you some examples of this, like for instance, if you're an Imperial player, like the first Flashpoint you have is Black Talon. It actually introduces you to Grand Moff Kilrin, Satil Shan, and basically tells a story that involves those characters that will show up later on in the game and have their own story arc. That is basically an appetizer to get you acclimated to these particular characters. Now, just to go ahead and continue on and to show you how the storyline goes, if you are a Republic player, you have two particular storyline driven flashpoints. One is called Terrell 5 and one is called Maelstrom Prison. Basically, in these particular flashpoints, what you're doing is you're actually going to free Revan. You do a few things in Terrell 5 that allow you to get access to Maelstrom Prison. You go to Maelstrom Prison, at the end you actually kill Grand Moff Kilrin. Spoilers, of course. And then, of course, you free Revan. The interesting thing is, about the same level range, you have two flashpoints for the Imperial side. And basically what that is boarding party, where you actually have to take a commando group and you infiltrate a Republic ship. You commandeer it, and that actually gives you access to the Foundry. And what it tells you is the Foundry is producing basically droids to attack the Empire, and you're basically sent there to destroy it. You actually get introduced to Revan, and you actually, quote, kill him, unquote, and basically stop what he's doing. And so it actually chronologically tells a story, which is extremely interesting. And that's something else that you will see when you play Star Wars. It's kind of interesting how the story arcs actually combine together chronologically in order to tell a story. And so, I mean, it's a completely interesting concept. It's not just a snapshot in time. It makes it feel fluid as you're moving the story along. And like I said, that's the best thing about Star Wars. It keeps you engaged. You're actually part of it. And that's what they try to make you. They make you feel that your choices actually have something to do with something, and that it changes outcomes. And generally not in Flashpoints, but in particular storylines and lore of your character, it actually does. In the long run, if you care about that. But anyway, back to Flashpoints. The other thing that it does is, as you're leveling up, it basically allows you to get some better gear. It allows you to get planetary comms. It has good gear drops. It allows your questing situation to be a lot easier. As you get better gear, obviously, it's going to be a lot easier to go kill baddies in the real world. And so that is something that's really, really good. Now, before the rise of the Hutt Cartel, when you got to max level, you were able to do a select number of hard mode flashpoints. And basically, a lot of them were to, once again, kind of keep the story fresh about what you're doing. But this was actually part of your progression. This was part of the progression curve. When the game first came out, at the end you had hard mode flashpoints, and then you had, at first, one operation, which would be the Eternity Vault, followed by Caraca's Palace. Now, it was kind of it was interesting how they tried to do it. Basically, they allowed flashpoints to be part of your end game. If you weren't in a guild that was good enough to do the operations, the hard mode flashpoints were your end game, and that was pretty good. I mean, they were able to tell a story. They were difficult. You could pug them, but by and large, they did have, for the time, they did have quite a difficulty rating. In my opinion, all depending, they were more difficult than the Eternity Vault, as far as at least the story mode goes. So, the gear that was dropped in these flashpoints was Kalumi gear. Kalumi gear was tier gear. It was set bonus gear. At the time, there were 3 tiers. There was Tierney's, Kalumi, and Ricotta. It actually dropped the 2nd tier. The last boss would always drop a piece of Kalumi gear. And that was part of your progression. You went with a group, you might get that drop, you need on that drop, and then of course you got your set bonus. You would continue to go through in order to actually get better enhancements and mods in order to make your gear better. Now, the bad thing is, the story mode version of Eternity Vault and the story mode version of Crasus Palace, it dropped the same stuff. It dropped Kalumi gear. And so, basically, if you got all decked out just by going through the flashpoints, you were actually able to move on to hard mode ops once you got completely geared out. Now, like I said, some of these flashpoints that came out, like one of the big things was the Siege of Kaon. A lot of people didn't like them. A lot of people thought that they were very difficult and it was hard to get groups for them. And so a lot of people actually preferred in actually getting in guilds that were able to do the operations. Now, the smart people, like for instance me, I was able to bring up 3 characters, and so every week I try to do an op and as many flashpoints as possible in order to get gear, in order to play at a high level. So, part of your progression curve, and it did kind of contradict. I would have personally thought it would be better if you were able to go in and maybe when you got into the flashpoints, the hard mode flashpoints dropped complete Teeny's gear, and then of course that would allow you to go to story mode operations. Story mode operations dropped Kalumi, hard mode operations dropped Ricotta. That would have been a better progression in my opinion, but they elected not to do it that way. TNEs was actually the most difficult to get, pretty much because you had to have 2 badge type items in order to get a piece. And so basically every boss that you did in an operation dropped these TNEs crystals. That, along with other badges you had to turn in to actually get TNEs pieces, it was actually easier to get Kalumi. So TNEs by and large was actually skipped over. The only reason that you would get TNEs gear is if you actually liked the look of the piece, which looked just like Kalumi gear except for a different color. So, you know, it's completely up to you. It was a stylization scenario, to be perfectly honest. I myself am big into fashion, and so there were a few TNEs pieces that I really wanted to get. Now, as we were moving on, before the rise of the Hut Cartel, a harder flashpoint came out, and it basically finished a Rat Ghoul storyline that started with the Siege of Kaon. It was even more difficult than Kaon. It was definitely more difficult than running story mode operations. Okay, this was Lost Island. Lost Island had a very difficult curve. I actually personally knew a guy who stayed in there one day, 8 hours, until he finally got it done. It was, you know, as far as what was available there, it was ridiculously difficult. You really had to be on top of your game in order to do that. The trash was very difficult. You had to CC certain things. I loved it. I thought it was great. The problem is, eventually they came with a group finder system that wasn't initially available. When the group finder system came out, of course, you would get put into group finder. You would get this as your random flashpoint. People would leave immediately. They just wouldn't do it. And so it was definitely more geared to actually get, you know, a group of people that you knew in order to actually take care of it. The funny part is, during the group finder situation, they actually made Kaon and Lost Island a separate part of Group Finder, so you could get additional rewards for completing them. Even today, so today, like, they nerfed They nerfed Lost Island, and they actually nerfed it and made it more difficult, because before it was understood that you have to be on top of your game. You have to understand that, right? And so the best players would not even attempt to queue for it, or even worry about, trying to get in with a random group in order to complete it. Now, even though they nerfed it, it's still difficult. And you get these people who have no earthly clue what they're doing. They just want to go hit a button, go through, and kill a bunch of stuff. They get there where you actually have to plop down electrical balls before you get shocked. You have to actually dodge grenades still from Lorik. I mean, it's still very difficult. And people who have no idea what they're doing make the whole operation terrible. In any case, Rise of the Hutt Cartel comes out. Okay, when Rise of the Hutt Cartel comes out, the flashpoints that they have when that comes out are actually just hard mode versions of flashpoints that we previously did not have hard mode versions for. Basically, these were some of the less interesting, as far as storyline goes, flashpoints. They did put like a bonus boss in them, and it actually dropped gear that had no set bonus to it. It was random. You could get gloves, belt. It was what they call black market. The Kalumi pieces were unassembled, right? So that was kind of cool. You could just get, pretty much an unassembled piece and go turn it in. However, with this, it's not unassembled. It's for a specific person that's in the group, and that's the only person that can use it. The bad thing is you might run in there, you might have a Juggernaut tank and a mercenary healer and, I don't know, 2 assassin DPSs and a Demolisher helm, which is for a power tech, excuse me. It's a little early in the morning. But for a power tech tank, that would actually drop, and you're just kind of stuck with that. But that is how you actually got your first pieces of gear, your first purple pieces of gear. And at the beginning, you put them on, and that's basically what you did in order to continue moving on. It was a very difficult time. It didn't really make a lot of sense. However, that's what you did. Those things did get you prepared for the Terror from Beyond, which was an upgraded level 50 operation. Basically, it was dropped not right before, but a little bit before the Rise of the Hutt Cartel. They basically just poofed it up to 55, and then you were able to get your first tier of gear, which was called Arcaning gear. You would have to go ahead and grind out a lot of these hard mode flashpoints in order just to get non-set bonus gear to really get in and start making waves. It was a little difficult as far as the curve goes, but they made a lot of changes, and basically how you do the story mode operations, and they nerfed them, but I'll go into that when we actually focus on the operations. So those new hard mode flashpoints that still use the tank, 2 DPS, and the healer were fairly difficult. They had a little bit of a curve, but they were pretty negotiable. They were not as difficult as the previous hard mode flashpoints before the expansion. Now, one thing that started to actually come up was what they call tactical flashpoints. And what tactical flashpoints would be, you could have 4 people just go. So they take 4 people and they go. And at first, these were the Zerka flashpoints. They had a new story arc. They still actually, had the function of producing story. So you had the story arc about how you're actually going to, if you're a pub, you're going to basically put Zerka in chains and bring them to their knees. If you are an imp, you're actually going to go steal their weapons and actually try to use them against the Republic, of course. But in any way, this was your introduction to tactical flashpoints, where they had little bitty canisters, like little bitty stations. We used to call them Purell stations, like sanitization stations, where you could actually, go and heal. And so that was a story mode component. The last boss actually did drop the same gear that the hard mode flashpoints dropped. And so you could get, as far as the last boss goes, you could get similar gear. another part of the progression as you're moving up. And this is before the wide, introduction of the badges that they have, and I'll go into that a little bit later. But in any case, you have the tactical flashpoints that are now entered into the system. There are hard mode variants of those that you actually do, and all this is done at 55, by the way. But there are hard mode variants that are involved where you actually do need a tank, 2 DPS, and a healer. So when they first come out at 55, open queue pretty much. Any 4 can go in and actually complete it on the story mode version. Hard mode version, you still need the holy trinity of MMOs in order to take down. And it had a good story. You took on Zerka, and a lot of the bosses were lacking, to be honest, but the last bosses did have some interesting mechanics. They were easily negotiable, but at least interesting mechanics. So after that, KDY came out. KDY had kind of a weak story, but it was a tactical flashpoint that was available to everyone. So basically, there was a 55 bracket, and then there was a 15 to 54 level bracket. So what it did is, first of all, the KDY flashpoint, Kuwait Drive Yards, it was actually a random flashpoint. So you would have to do 2 scenarios and fight a boss. It's 1 of 3 bosses, and I think 1 of 6 scenarios. And so that was random. So when you first come in, you go to the right, you get this random set, 1 of 6. And then after you do the scenario to complete it, you get to go to elevator. When you go to elevator, you get another 1 of the 6. It can't be the same as the first one. However, there's only 6, so everything gets monotonous after a while. But at least it was an attempt to put something out there where you didn't have to wait in queue for a really long time in order to do a flashpoint. The rewards for the flashpoint were horrible. They still are horrible. They're horrible today. You get no money. The only thing that you get is from the last boss. You actually do get 3 planetary comms, which will help you gear up a little bit. There are champion bosses on each level, and those champion bosses also drop 1 planetary comm, and they have a chance to drop this construction kit that will allow you to basically buy gear in lieu of like reputation vendor or anything like that. Which there is a reputation point to it, but you would actually have to have these KDY construction kits to get particular items from the reputation vendor. One of such is a very interesting mount, but just take a look at it in the game. You'll basically see what we have here. But basically, this is the one thing that it did is this: when you are leveling up, a lot of times you want to break the monotony of just going to a planet, doing the planet quest or your class quest in order to level up. You want a little extra experience, you want a little extra gear, so you make a tank that can get fast queues. Okay? And so anyway, with this KDY situation, you no longer have to make a tank or healer in order to get faster queues. The down part is as you go through it, if you only do KDYs, it does not prepare you for the actual Holy Trinity, because it's not designed to need a tank. It causes a lot of frustration. So I go in, I'm a DPS. This time I go in KDY, I've got 3 other DPS with me, so it's 4 DPS and we're able to clear it. Okay, so the next time I go into KDY, I'm a DPS, there's a tank there and 2 other DPS. Well, the tank wants to tank. Okay, but I know it's not designed because I just cleared it without a tank. And so I go and I jump in and start killing a bunch of stuff. And then the tank gets mad. It's like, why don't you wait for the tank? Because they don't need to be tanked. I go in and hit this. You go in and do your thing. It doesn't matter. It will all equal out. However, it causes a lot of frustration because tanks want a tank. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it sets us up to have conflict with one another. And so that's something that was unforeseen. And as you continue to do it, it will not, like I said, prepare you for operations. And so that completely takes it off. Now, since Kuwait Drive Yards, they actually have not set in another flashpoint that actually was for the Holy Trinity. Okay, basically they came out with the incursion of Tython and Korriban. There is a great story arc that basically begins what you're going to do at Rakata Prime. And so, basically, if you're an imp, you have to defend Korriban, possibly. It's kind of random. So there's a scenario where you defend Korriban. There's a scenario where you attack Typhon. And basically, if you're pub, vice versa. Okay? Ultimately, what it's doing is it's promoting a storyline where basically it's called Forged Alliances. Because we're basically taken aback. There is one guy from the pub side, one guy from the Sith side, who's basically jerking our chain, and unbeknownst at the time is actually working for Revan. Revan does make a return. So you do those two, you figure out who the bad guys are, you follow the bad guys to Manon. Manon is another Flashpoint. Very good gear as far as vibroblades go, with some of the tokens that they drop. Once again, as of right now, it is not Holy Trinity Flashpoint, as I mentioned. Anybody can go in. Its main goal at this point is basically to tell you the story. And so you go in, and as you go in, you actually have to fight, chase down these agents that are trying to procure resources in order to get an army up and going. And so you follow them down. They are revealed. They reveal themselves to you as they are the enemies. They try to kill you. You have to kill a boss and get to safety. The boss fights, very interesting mechanics. It's actually a very interesting Flashpoint, although it's not difficult. Not difficult at all. So, after that, you're actually saved by a member of the Republic, and you're saved. Okay, you meet some NPCs that are going to help you along the way, and then the next thing that comes out is Rakata Prime. Rakata Prime, once again, is a tactical Flashpoint. It's going to cause some frustration as you don't need a tank or a healer in order to finish it. It does cause a lot of frustrations for people who want to be identified in those roles, and it's basically a field trip is what it is. The Rakata Prime Flashpoint is not interesting as far as the boss mechanics or anything. It's nothing that you haven't seen before. It's fairly, you can't even say tank and spank. You just go and it's kind of a Zerg fest. But the one thing that they did do is as you're going, it is a very, very beautiful Flashpoint. The story that it tells is quite interesting. You basically go to the top. It basically reveals that Revan will be the next badass that we have to destroy. It will also tell us, and according to the developers, there are going to be situations where members of the Republic and members of the Empire will be working together in order to destroy Revan. And so it sets you up for that. It doesn't allow that right now. Imps have to play with imps, and pubs have to play with pubs. And like I said, they just go through the storyline. It's like a field trip, okay? You get off the bus, you walk through, ooh, ah, ooh, you reveal the story, and you get back on the bus and go home. It's easy. There's really nothing to it at all. The gear it drops. At this point in the game, unless you just started, the gear that drops is negligible. Okay, it doesn't matter, because the big thing that it does is as you queue up for Group Finder, it can give you elite comms and ultimate comms, and ultimate comms can be used to get second best in slot non-set bonus gear. It's not quite as good as tier gear, but it's a great benefit, and so it will do that. You can actually queue up with a weekly to get that, and that will take care of it. And there are various quests through Group Finder that you can do. That's the most important thing that it does. Okay, so no more are you actually going to go to get pieces unless you just started. This is no longer a progression piece. Okay, the only progression part is you get badges to normally help out companions or alts or something like that. But like I said, they have removed this from your personal progression to in-game. Okay? Now, I do, I told you about it. Let's go ahead and break down and tell you some of the bad things in my opinion. Okay, there are too much like challenge modes in World of Warcraft. That's it. Basically, like they're just like scenarios. Okay, there aren't any real bosses or anything like that for the most part. There is a harder mob, obviously, that has mechanics that is a boss, but it's not difficult. Once you actually, they have interesting mechanics, not difficult mechanics. Okay. As I mentioned before, there's no need for a tank. So tanks do get a little pissy when the DPS jumps in and just AoEs a bunch of stuff because they're not used to that. Okay. It's just, like I said, it's just like a field trip. It's just a Zerg fest. And so that's bad. I think that we would ultimately appreciate it more if there was a little more tact involved, and also if it was a little more difficult. Wow, this told the story. I got it. I'm going along with the story, but I've actually got to be on my game and a little bit. I can't just put it, in cruise control in order to do this. I have to pay attention. Pay attention to the fight, and I will pay more attention to the story. Not just okay, all right, spacebar. Here we go. Some of the good things, though, you do get faster groups. You have no rolls at all. So a DPS will not have to wait an hour in order to get in. It, just kind of puts you in a queue and takes you. This is excellent storytelling. Storytelling at its best. It does still makes you feel like you're a part of the story. You're doing this. I came in. I discovered this. I'm the one who now knows that we have to fight Revan. Revan has attacked me. This is me. I'm in the story. These are very quick. That is, another good thing. You're not going to spend an hour in these at all. You're probably not going to spend 20 minutes. Once again, I did mention a few bad things. I'd like to go back. There's no loot. It's not part of your progression. I didn't, go so much over that at all. We don't have to have set pieces. But it would be good for the last boss to throw us a bone, throw us a random, quote, 180 piece. That would actually put it as part of our progression again. A lot of people would want to actually queue up to do those, and that would give it some more replay value. Because as of right now, it has very little replay value. You go through it one time, you see the story, ooh, this is great, and that's it. The Flashpoints of old, they did have replay value. You had to go through as part of your progression. Now you just don't. And so, those are some of the problems of, the bad things of the Flashpoints. Now, how do we fix this? Okay. Well, one thing is you can keep your current way of doing it, just like you did with the Zerka. The new ones that you recently came out, the new tactical Flashpoints, make hard mode versions of that, where you actually do need the holy trinity of MMOs, the tank, the DPS, and the healers in order to get through there. Make them difficult. Make them a little challenging. We want that to be part of our progression, in my opinion. I would really like to have that. I think that is a rite of passage in order for you to go through and complete the Flashpoint. So I would like to have it back similar to the way it was. Not exactly, but similar to the way that it was. And the badges are nice and everything that you get, but actually dropping good pieces of loot in it will keep us coming. Because you took a lot of time to design this. As it is now, we see the story, we're gone. We might want to do it, as far as a random goes, throughout the week just to get some badges or something, but we don't care. The other thing, stop wasting time on Strongholds and Galactic Starfighter, especially the rail shooter space game. If you have a developer even looking at that, you're wrong. You're just bad, BioWare. Stop doing that. Okay? Put your emphasis actually on the content that people want to do. Okay? Focus on the Flashpoints, focus on the ops, and focus on the PvP, the land-based PvP. Focus on those things first. Because guess what? Most of us are 55. These are things you do at 55. We want to do things at 55. Okay? Focus on those things. Make the Flashpoints part of the progression. Now, that's all the time that we have this week. Thank you for listening to the Cult of Crasus. If you do like the show, please like us at the bottom and also subscribe to the channel. I would love to be part of your life. Leave any comments that you have at the bottom. If you have any questions, make sure to ask them. I would eventually like to do a Q&A scenario as far as the show goes as it continues on. I hope everyone likes it and will pay enough attention for that to be relative. So please put any comments, any questions at the bottom. You'll never know, I might get to the question and actually read it as part of the show. Once again, thank you for allowing me to be part of your day.